I don't know. I don't know. There is a garden in the park. I know what it is. Like a neighborhood. He's got a workshop there, and they the story that I made they realized that his one they want to measure his eye was told sometimes came to the avenue. They want to put up high enough so it has a lot of stuff, but that would be qualifying being in the course very specific in there. But it's terrible. It's so that we could, show it to the next generation. We want people to pay money so that okay. Yeah. So I think over here pretty good. Okay. EDC still running the ball that has they're getting ready to get numbers like the well, that's not the pepper one. What's not the red one? Here, I'm a volunteer member of the rail operations crew here at the Ohio Railroad Museum. As you can see, this is a working shop. So I need to caution you about some things as you go through. Always watch where you're putting your feet. Not only do we have rails and things like that, but there are attachment points, things sitting around. Don't get so interested in your camera that you back up and trip, because you're going to get hurt if you do. There's a lot of sharp edges. All these things are metal, a lot of sharp edges, so be aware of where you are at all times, where your feet are, where your body is. Okay? Please do not touch things. Some things have been put in places on purpose. We don't want to move. We don't want something to fall off. A lot of stuff weighs a lot. Hits your feet. It can be very harmful. So use common sense at all times. You can take all the pictures you like, and you can ask any questions you like, and if I know the answer, I'll tell you, and if I don't, I'll make something up. But I'm going to walk around doing these patterns. You get a chance to see everything. Take your time. Take a look at what you like. Like I said, ask questions and enjoy the tour. But at all times, watch where your feet are, watch where you are, and please don't touch anything. All right? Any questions? We'll start off. Now, this building was built and opened in 2005 when the roof had collapsed at the roundhouse, damaged a number of 19th century steam engines and rolling stock. The decision was made to build this shop rather than to send all of this stuff out to somewhere else, and we would restore it ourselves, and we have done so. All of the engines that were damaged in that collapse have been restored, put back up at the museum. The building now functions in two ways primarily, and they're interchangeable if we don't have a bright line. It is the Rail Operations Center. Rolling stock and locomotives that are used in the passenger operation are inspected, maintained, and repaired as necessary here, both cars and engines. Also, it's the center for working on the railroad right-of-way. Ties have to be replaced, rails have to be replaced, things have to be tightened up, constantly inspected. So that starts out here with this work train that I've got behind me. In addition, of course, the shop, for its name, is the restoration shop. Exhibit items are restored here back to condition that they are either going to be operational or at least look as they did when they were first put into service. If it's a, quote, cosmetic restoration, it is not going to be put in service, but I will tell you that the artisans down here, it's not just a paint job. Everything is as it was in terms of structure and finish. And if you could find the parts to start the motor or put the wheels, the new wheels on, it could be put in service. And that's what's happening today. So we're going to walk very carefully down this aisle. Start with 8905, an SW7 switcher made by EMD. Some of you may have been here before and seen it in its red paint with the number 1200 on it.
I did.
Okay. Well, it was repainted to its number that it had at Conrail when the Conrail Historical Society gave us the paint to do it. So we put it back in its Conrail here at the shop, and it's got its original number on it. It is an operating engine. All right? This engine could be used for switching, could be used for on the road. First generation of the GPs, made again by EMD. It is operational, but it's not blue carded. What do I mean by blue carded? It's not been inspected to the level of passenger service. So it operates as a shop engine for here. This would be about the same as the SW7. This is the first generation of this type. Now a later, more powerful version of the GP is here. This is the GP30, number 6944. It is one of our passenger pulling engines. It's down here right now getting some service. But sometimes when you come in the museum, other than 3802, which is on the train today, you'll see 6944. Now the shop is not divided rigidly into work areas, but tends to operate that way. So this area that you're in now is generally occupied by rail operations, working on the equipment that you see on these tracks. As we move down this way, we'll get to an area that the restoration facility folks use, particularly the metal worker, George Harwood. We have a metal worker here, George Harwood, who is an absolute master. He can form metal like you can't believe it. If you have not seen it, when you go back, go into the North Car Shop, engine 51, there's an EA in there that's been recently restored. Look at the stainless steel bright wing around the headlight. Yep. And think how hard it was to fabricate and then curve that perfectly, both this way and this way, to fit on that engine. George did that using what's called an English wheel down here in the shop, from scratch. No pattern. It had to work from drawings and pictures that he found.
He's a pro.
He is a pro. He is a true pro.
Tender in President Washington's on the other side.
This tender is the tender off of the President Washington, which is sitting over on that track that we'll get to. It's sitting here because President Washington is currently in line for restoration. Not for an operation. It would be way too large for this railroad. Much too much engine. But it will be restored so that if somebody someday wanted to invest a couple of $1 million into putting that into service, it could be done. Right now it's going to get what we call a cosmetic restoration. And as you can see, it needs it. All this has to be replaced.
That's it right there.
So it will be cut out, replaced, not just putty. It will be put back to look like it did when it pulled the Royal Blue Express. The iron boxcar over there, Civil War era style boxcar. There's one up on display in the museum, and this one's down here just generally for storage because we don't want them in the rain. They won't last that way, but we really didn't have enough room right now up at the museum to display both of them.
That makes sense.
This is a huge press that we got from the shipyard, and right now we don't use it, but it could be used, and don't ask me what we would use it for, because I don't know. Right. These are locomotive jacks. If we have to replace wheels on either a car or locomotive, and we don't have what's called a drop table here, so we have to jack up the coach, car, or engine, and these massive jacks are what are used for that. You can't really, they have wheels on them, but you can't really roll them around. You have to bring the crane down, lift them up, and bring them into position. It's a little scary, by the way, when you put an engine up in the air on these things, at least to me.
Yeah, I don't want it going.
You can see the equipment over here. table, all kinds of stuff that George uses. And I don't work with George directly, so asking me too many detailed questions will get you too many lies. Yes.
When you repair the holes in the steel, do you, patch it, or do you have to replace an enormous piece of steel? And where do you get the?
Of course, it depends. The question was, when we have to patch something like the rust there, what do we do? And it depends upon the area and the material. But generally what happens is an area is cut out, usually using a torch, a new piece fabricated to that shape, including curved as necessary, like the corners here, and that's put on and welded, and then the welds ground down until everything is absolutely smooth as part of the prep for painting. I can show you when we walk back up on 8905, the blue engine, a corner that you would not know, but that corner's new. The whole corner was fabricated by George. We had a big rust problem there, and when we got into it, we found out that while it was still operating, somebody had put a lot of putty in, and the whole thing was a mess. They had to cut the whole corner out, which is curved. George fabricated from plate steel what we needed, and it was put back on. You can't tell that it's ever come off. Remember, watch where you're going. It started by it's the B&O Transportation Museum as part of when they were a separate corporation.
And I find it interesting that they put such a small amount of their important, items in the I mean, this one is safe, it's covered in lots of
This is a P7. It's a Pacific. Well, what's that mean? Somebody, not me, made up names for many of the wheel alignments of steam engines. So you hear an Atlantic, a Pacific, a 10-wheeler, these phrases. The Pacific was probably the premier passenger steam engine in the 20th century. We call it a 4-6-2. 4 wheels on the leading truck, 6 drivers, 3 aside, 2 wheels, 1 each side on the trail truck. Trail truck supports the firebox, which is that gray box you see here, and allows you to have a bigger firebox than if you did not have the trailing truck. That's where it rides. The rest of the weight rides primarily on the driver so that you get adhesion to the rail. Of course, you can't have too much weight on any one point or the rail will not carry it. So it's a formula that some engineer, and I don't mean the guy driving the train, had to come up with when it was designed. The lead truck, usually on a passenger engine in the 20th century, was a 4-wheel lead truck. It tends to lead the engine into the curves and keep it tracking better at higher speeds. Remember, a passenger engine was supposed to run fast. Well, how do you know whether this is a fast passenger engine or a slow freight? Well, I'll show you. I'll walk over here. How high is the wheel? Taller than I am, right?
Yeah.
Of course, I used to be taller than I am too. But anyway, the tall wheel is fast, but not powerful. Smaller circumference wheel on a freight engine, like the Mikado sitting up in the North Car Shop.
And the Allegheny.
Well, the Allegheny is a combination engine. In between, it can do both. But it's one of the last superpower engines.
Yeah.
But single-purpose engines, tall wheels, not a lot of pull in terms of heavy, but then passenger cars are not as heavy as a loaded string of coal cars. So each time that the piston pushes back from the cylinder, this rotates the wheel half a turn. If the wheel is smaller, it's driving it a shorter distance. It's low gear. If it's tall like this, it's going to go faster for the same number of piston strokes. So you can tell this is a high-speed passenger engine from the diameter or circumference of the wheel. So you have a firebox. Next you have a boiler. Hot gas from from the firebox at 2,000 degrees passes through tubes inside the boiler, which is full of water. The tubes plus the crown sheet on the firebox transfer the heat from the fire to the water and boil it, creating steam pressure. Steam pressure is accumulated in a dome up here, and that's where the valve is that is controlled by the engineer to put steam into the cylinder. Depending upon which direction he wants, this valve gear, this is a Walschaerts valve gear, this valve gear can operate so that when the piston is pushing or pulling, it's a double action piston, it's going to drive the wheel one way or the other, depending upon where this is set. This is in neutral right now. So that's how they reverse the engine. On an engine this big, you couldn't do it by hand. But there's a bar pulling it out of the cab. So as you can see, there's an air pressure cylinder that operates the valve here. On the other side, not on this side, on this engine, are steam-driven air pumps to pump up the air pressure for the brakes and other operations. The problem with the 19th century engines is, somebody said, why don't we take one of those and put it on the passenger train? Go look at them, there's no air brakes on them. At least not until the ones in the 1880s. George Westinghouse designed the triple air valve system in the 1880s, and until then, there weren't air brakes on the engines, and we can't run a passenger train with the public on it without air brakes. We do run under full FRA requirements, even though we're a short line tourist railroad. The front of it is not part of the boiler. It's all lagged with sheet metal to kind of look the same. Some engines are, some aren't, but this one is. But this is actually the smoke box. The gases that were going through the tubes end up in this area here. They're brought down and they are exhausted up through the stack. The exhausting steam from the cylinders also goes up through the stack, and there's what's called a pot. It's a nozzle sitting in the front of the smoke box. When it exhausts, it creates what's called a Venturi effect, a vacuum that helps suck the hot gases through the tubes, improves the efficiency of the engine. So that's why you see a steam engine start out, that's the steam exhausting, pulling the smoke up to the stack. The middle wheel does not have a flange on it. The flange, of course, is what keeps the wheel on the rail. The reason is, going around a curve, you've got a straight line, rigid frame. Three wheels absolutely rigid in place. The curve is like this. That would not allow this wheelbase to go around a tight curve, but because there is no flange on the middle, actually this one actually has a flange middle wheel. I'm wrong. You're asking why it's a Bofer, because it was replaced at some point. It was built with spoke wheels, but that Bofer driver was put on there at some point when they had to replace one. That's all.
Okay.
This one does not have a flangeal spindle wheel, so it would be restricted to mainline operations where the curves were gentle. If you look at some of the 19th century engines, when they were running the old mainline in its original configuration, tight curves up the Patapsco River, you'll see the middle wheel is flanges, so that it could make it around the curve.
What year is this?
1927.
How much tractor force does this come out?
I don't know what the drive off is. If you've looked at 1604 up in the Allegheny, up in the car shop, that I do know tested higher than any other engine, including your big one. Now be careful crossing in between here. We're going to go into one of the biggest paint booths you've ever seen. It's a paint booth big enough to put something like this in it and paint it.
So it looks like some work's already been done on it a little bit. Like, what are these red things?
Well, we started doing restoration on it, and now they're going to work on this for a while, and then they'll finish this up. It happens around here. Somebody makes a change in the operational plan, and we ask that to do it.
This is one of the cars that will go on the 1 mile express, right? Or
No, this probably will not be operational, although I'm not sure. You could make this operational. This is not a streamlined, lightweight, stainless steel coach. You can see it's not. It's all steel.
Oh, yeah.
This coach is much older. This is a really unique coach. It's an observation car back from the 1920 train. I'm not sure they're going to go through the elaborate process of inspecting it and having ready. But it does at least have roller bearings on the wheels. You'll see some cars have a box with a lid. That's a friction bearing. You have to pour oil in it every now and then. The oil's wicked up simply on a brass plate that the axle rides on. Friction bearings are no longer to be favored, and you can't interchange cars, not that we do very often, with a friction bearing. But these have roller bearings, so they are fully able to be pulled on a modern train if it were put into service. You can see what's going on here. This has been stripped down, the paint, using a needle gun, which is, by the way, an exhausting process to needle gun one of these. All of this rust, this will all be cut out, will all be welded back in, and all of the frames, window frames, door frames put back on, and it'll be put back in service. It has the original cafe bar back in the back that existed, and even some posters on the wall that were then in. But I can't let you in the condition it's in today. But wait, it'll get back up to the museum and it will look a whole lot different than you saw it today.
What color scheme are they putting on?
Say what?
What livery are they going to put on?
It's going to be the dark blue livery. That would be the period that it ran.
So, I feel like I remember talking to some guy before it was pulled out to the shops. Like, is there any talk that they allow people to walk inside of it when it's finished restored, or is it just going to stay like as it was?
I have not been told.
Because he told us about this the great mural of like cherry blossoms.
Yeah,
and
I'm hoping that they'll arrange it when it's done so that it can be, at least on tours, shown inside as well as out. Right now we can't do that. I hope that will happen, but I have not been told whether that's going to be part of the operation. My job here is to work on these things, principally on the rail operation side. And I do help with restoration too, and to operate trains. I'm not the one who tells me what I'm going to work on or when I'm going to run the train. So I don't really know what the plan is for this once it's restored, but I know that it will be fully restored as far as appearance goes.
So how do they get a car here if it doesn't have roller bearing?
Oh, we can still use friction bearings. I mean, here at the museum?
Yeah.
Usually they're loaded on heavy depressed center flat cars.
So they can't run on the rails outside of here.
You try to get CSX to drag one of those. They don't want to do it. We interchange with CSX. That's how we get to the outside world. CSX doesn't want to run anything like that.
Okay.
When we sent, I don't know if you all know about 1309. It's an articulated engine
Oh, yeah.
now running out on the Western Maryland Scenic.
We used to call him Big Mike, right, Dad?
Well, it's out there. We loaded it. I was part of the crew that broke it apart and loaded it because they wouldn't drag it out. We had to put pieces of that engine onto depressed center flat cars to go all the way out to Cumberland.
Kind of funny. I accidentally saw it in Brunswick hit a signal.
Yeah, well, it hit us.
Traffic crossing.
Yeah, some truck actually.